All right. Hi, my name is Matt Abedi. I was a performer at the Magnet Theater for 10 years, and I've been slowly doing videos on YouTube about improv and answering questions that people leave for me in the comments. So if you have any questions at the end of this video, please feel free to leave a comment and I'll try to answer your question, whatever it is about improv. There was a lot of interest in my video about doing a Spokane or a pretty flower. In this video, I'm going to offer some warm-ups that you can do that will prime your team to do a pretty flower and work on some of the core skills that are going to be necessary to have a really great pretty flower. There are tons of things to work on, so I'm going to focus on 4 areas that I think are really important to warm up before we start really getting into a Spokane or a pretty flower. That is building a source scene with stakes. That's that middle scene that we're going to spoke out of. We need to work on framing so that we make it clear to our teammates the thing that we want to focus in on, whether that's spoking out or digging more into that idea inside of the source scene. We want to work on exploration and heightening so that the team feels primed to make those kinds of choices whenever they jump out of the scene. And then the last thing is we want to work on passing focus. Really, maybe that should be like the top thing, is that we should be worried about passing focus. And passing focus is really important because in that source scene, especially have 6 to 8 people on stage all at once, depending on how you're doing your pretty flower or Spokane. There's a good opportunity that if people aren't passing focus, the scene gets muddled. We never focus in on any character or any game or anything that we want to explore. And then what happens is we never spoke out, or whenever we spoke out, the idea isn't clear enough for the team to kind of have really great instructions. And what happens there is, like, even if the spoke ends up being pretty good, it ends up causing all these problems because the spoke transforms in a huge way. And then when we come back to the source scene, we have to integrate a bunch of new ideas in the source scene. It's very possible, but it's not what we want out of a Spokane. We don't want to have the chief amount of discovery in the spoke. We want to do that inside the source scene. Okay, so here are some suggestions for things that you can do in each of those 4 topic areas. First one we're going to talk about is passing focus. There are lots of really great games. You've probably practiced a whole bunch of them. Zip, Zap, Zop is like the most famous passing the focus game that you can do when you warm up. I prefer, if you've done improv for a little bit, try doing Zip, Zap, Zap, Zop, Zop, Zop. It just adds another layer where people have to say, are we on the second zap zap? Are we on one of the 2 zaps? Are we on the second or third zop? And then when do we loop back? So just like zip, zap, zop, but someone will say zip to the first person. That second person will say zap to a third person. That third person will say zap to a fourth person. The fourth person will say zop to a fifth person, and then zop, and then zop, and then zip. And that'll be the pattern. Another really famous, very easy to do passing the focus exercise here is to do categories. Categories is very easy. We don't say the category at the very top. What happens is we point to someone and we start our list. So someone might point to someone and say Lucky Charms, and the next person might point to somebody else and say Rabbit's Foot, and the next person will point to someone else, and now we know that the pattern are things that are actually Lucky Charms or things that people hold on to for luck. We build that list. Once everyone in the circle has contributed to that category, we might start a second category and a third category. And then eventually, at sort of the head of the game, we try to pass all 3 categories at once to each other, just categories. And whenever we take that step, sorry, this is really important, I guess. There are two variations. Variation one is we continue to add more things to that list, or each person tries to repeat the same thing that they said in the original list. So if every time it was passed to me, I said rabbit's foot, that means every time we do that category, we're passing the focus there. I would always say rabbit's foot. So that's categories. And then one more idea for passing the focus is, I would say, if you're doing warm-up scenes, one of the things you can do there is play a lot of group games where it's all against one. And the way that you can kind of set this up for the most success is the first person just gives their opinion, and then one person or everybody kind of chimes in with a huge reaction to that opinion. And our goal isn't to focus in on everyone else's reaction. We're gonna yes and all react in the same way, but what we want to do is egg the person who gave us a hot take to continue kind of feeding us this emotional ball. So an example of how this might go is the person whose turn it is might say something like, I hate people who bike on the road. Everyone else can go like, yes, totally. Or they might go, oh my God, you are a monster. Now our goal is going to be to ask that person questions. When did you turn into this person? You're like kind and compassionate everywhere else. And we want sort of the focus person to then kind of continue to double down on their idea. I've always been like this since the day I was born, and everyone else goes, the day you were born? Or, like, me too, right? So the whole group, either, whether it's 2 people or 7 people, they're all going to agree. They're going to resume focus on the person who's giving us the hot take. We're going to egg them on to do more of their thing, and everyone else is going to continue to just react really big and ask them a question to get them to kind of double down. All right. Next, we want to have the source scene have stakes. So in a Spokane, we want to avoid a source scene where people are kind of sitting on the couch, not doing anything, trading opinions. We can absolutely do a Spokane that way, but it's a little bit more challenging. So these warm-ups are focused in on making sure that we're always thinking about scenes that have a lot of weight to them. There's a lot of heat and weight. One of them is, why are you late? The game works like this. One person turns to the first person in a circle and says, hey, why are you late? And that person starts to describe the plot of a movie. And they continue to describe it until someone else in the circle is able to guess the name. So, why are you late? And someone goes, my dad was a king of this jungle and my uncle killed him. And someone might go like, and he killed him in a stampede, right? And someone else might go like, Lion King. Cool, we got it. And then now we're going to move to the next person. Hey, why are you late? And this person says, I was working a regular office job until a bunch of secret agents came in, and this kind of cultish guy offered me a red pill or a blue pill. So I might say, that's the Matrix. That's correct. And we move on to the next person. This primes us to think of scenes and scenarios that have a lot to them and a big story, which is what we want, again, in that source scene. Another example here is to do pass the face into a scene. And what we want to do in pass the face is one person turns to the next person and makes a face. Like, that person tries to copy exactly what they saw. The way that we're going to add a little bit to this is we're going to make sure there's a big emotion whenever someone is passing their face. Angry, happy, sad, surprised. any of the really basic emotions, and you can kind of play with some of the more nuanced ones there, right? So why do we want a big emotional underline? Because once we move into the scene, what we want to do then is have the person who starts the scene explain why this person is having a big reaction. That explanation will probably be a high stakes scene. So if someone's crying, it's like, just got broken up with, that kind of weight and heat in a source scene is really important because it lets the audience know we're watching this for a particular reason, and that weight gives us a little bit more opportunity to bring characters who are going to be meaningful in that scenario. So if someone's going through a breakup, we might see an ex, we might see a friend who hated that person to begin with, we might see a parent, right? Having a lot of emotional weight and heat usually means we're in the middle of a really great story. All right, we're going to move to another topic. This is framing. So a little recap on what's framing inside of Spokane. So we've got some people inside of that scene, and every once in a while when something strange happens, or even if it's not something strange, it's something that we want to explore with a little bit more depth, we just want to take a moment and underline it and then try to understand its logic. So an example of this might be someone is a little too much of a people pleaser. You might be like, hey, like you seem to go out of your way to make anybody feel good about themselves, right? That sort of framing, right, tells us a little bit about that character and what they do. And these exercises will help a team identify things and communicate to their scene partner, hey, I want to learn more about this thing, this behavior that I'm noticing in you, or this behavior I'm endowing you with. So the first thing to do is a game called I'll Do It Again. One person blames someone, says, you always do blank. And that person goes, that's right. They'll repeat the accusation. They'll say, I'll do it again. And they'll give you an explanation as to why they'll do it again. So, hey, you stole my baby's candy. That's right. And I'll do it again because the world is dog eat dog out there. Man, I do a lot of jokes about being mean to children. I just framed myself. I guess I'm going to work on other bits. Maybe I'll pre-write some of these games so I'm not always reaching for low-hanging fruit, easy to steal candy. But in a circle, all that's going to happen is the first person accuses someone to their right. That person says, that's correct. They'll repeat the thing that happened, and they'll say, I'll do it again, and they'll give a reason. Inside of a scene, this is a really great practice to repeat the accusation to make sure we got it with a total clarity. And once we have it with total clarity, we want to justify or explain why we have that behavior. And as a little refresher, we always want to make the reason something we have total ownership over, right? There is a logic. I'm not doing this because I can't help it. I'm actually doing this from a place of power. I believe in my heart of hearts that this is the right thing to do. The next thing that we can do is work on self-framing. And we can do this in a circle using the same sort of pattern. What will happen is one person will say, I know most people, and they'll finish the sentence. And then the person next to them, but us, we do this other thing, okay? How this might go, we know most people like to tell people that they read their book for book club. But us, we do the opposite. We read the book and act like we didn't. And they might give a short explanation as to why they do that. The idea here is to sort of practice an uncommon tactic whenever we're framing. Usually when people think about framing, they are talking about framing somebody else or themselves, but we can also frame me and my scene partner as two people who believe the same thing or feel the same way. We're similar characters. It also makes it a little bit easier to do both parts of framing, which is identifying the thing that we want to focus on, underlining the specific behavior, and the second part, creating a justification that has legs. And again, what I mean by justification that has legs is we're looking for a justification that a character has full and total ownership of. They believe this in their heart of hearts, and they can explain the logic to you without saying, oh, I'm so helpless, or I'm actually kind of dumb, or I'm on drugs, which is the reason why I believe this thing. All right, fourth and final topic area that I think is really important for warm-ups that will prep you and your team for a really great Spokane or Pretty Flower. And that is working on heightening and exploration. So one thing that we can do that focuses in on exploration is building a character. So if we're all in a circle, one person steps in the center of the circle, and we get 3 to 5 people to endow that character. So one person might be like, he wears a cowboy hat. And the other person says something like, he talks in a real grizzled, deep voice. And a third person says he's constantly smoking, right? Our idea in building a character is to make choices that zero in on an archetype. So we don't want to make choices that are like super outlandish. He's a dragon, but he works in an office. And the office is, like in outer space. It's like, what are we doing here, right? We're moving into like territory we have to do a lot of explanation. So we want to tighten up and almost think like we're moving into an archetype, right? We can make one choice that's a little odd, but generally we want to kind of zero in on this type of person. And then what we want to do is have this person monologue. What this does in terms of exploration is, remember, exploration is, if this is true, what else is true? And so in this situation, what we want is exploration moves to be in the same family, or for the audience, for ourselves to think, of course, someone like this would also do this other thing, right? If this is true, then this would also be true. So someone who behaves like this will, of course, do something that's a little bit, would be in that same family. So somebody who's a little oversensitive, right, is a real poet. We might find out that they cry whenever they see antidepressant commercials. We might also find out that they only wear black. We might find out that because they wear all black and they go on long walks at night, they've been hit by several cars, which of course makes them more sad. So these are kind of exploration moves that we want to do. We want to make choices that kind of are bundled together, and they'll produce these kind of loops of logic, these kinds of morsels that make sense to us. Second thing that we want to do is a heightening story. Heightening story works like this. First person in the circle will tell a story. Story could be about anything, but hopefully it has a beginning, middle, and end. Has a little, so maybe a story from your day. I thought I wasn't going to make it to work on time, but I ended up catching this train that was going express, and it dropped me off right at work, and I made it in on time. The next person will repeat that story, and they're going to pick one detail to exaggerate. So for that story, they might say, I happened to run into a dragon, and that dragon flew me directly to my office, and I made it to work on time. The next person in the circle will tell the exact same story. I was late for work, I was on the train, and they're going to take the one element that was exaggerated, right? Finding an express train. The next version of the story had someone running into a dragon. The third is perhaps someone goes, I remembered that I could teleport, and I teleported myself into the office. We're going to keep going around in a circle, and we're going to exaggerate that one part that, I suddenly found myself lucky, and that saved the day, right? We're going to exaggerate just that one part. So the next person's going to tell this story exactly, and they're going to find something even more fantastical than remembering that someone can teleport that made them get into the office on time. There's just two things that are really important. Number one is heightening only works whenever we maintain the base reality. Everything else stays pretty similar. And the one thing that's strange, we make it stranger. And the second part is the thing that we're making stranger, we make it clear what the logic is. So the logic in that story is that some sort of act of God shows up and saves the day by chance. So we're going to make more and more crazy acts of God that help me get to work on time. That'll help us specifically with heightening. I'm going to sneak in one more exercise for exploration and heightening because I'm trying to keep these videos under 25 minutes. That game works like this. The game is called Beep Beep Toot Toot. First person in the circle says beep beep toot toot, welcome to blank town. So that could be Chocolate Town. The next person goes, in Chocolate Town, everything is made of chocolate. The third person then adds a new detail. In Chocolate Town, when it's summer, the whole place turns into a puddle. And the fourth person says, in Chocolate Town, in the winter, this happens. And we go around in a circle and we explain all the things that happened in Chocolate Town. And once we make it to the original person, that person goes, that's right, that's Chocolate Town. We don't necessarily need to be funny, but again, what we're going to do is learn all of the things that happen in Chocolate Town. This will mix some of the lessons from heightening and exploration because we'll have an opportunity to talk about how chocolatey things are, and we'll also be able to talk about, well, if this is true, this other thing is true. So to use the last example, we might say that, everyone is made of chocolate, all the documents are made of chocolate, and the air is made of chocolate. To use the other example around like in the summer, the whole city is a pool, we could then say, well, the whole city is a pool, which means that kids can't go to school. There are no schools, which means literacy is a huge problem in Chocolate Town. First example is an example of heightening, right? How many things are really made of chocolate? It's like everything is made of chocolate. We breathe chocolate, which is not good for anybody's lungs. Which is heightening how much of everything is made of chocolate. And then on the other side, the exploration side as well. If it's true that all the buildings melt in the summer in Chocolate Town, what else does that mean? Well, that also means that maybe the schools aren't open, which means the kids are dumb. Okay, there are tons and tons of warm-ups that you can do to really get prepped for a pretty flower, or as it's also called, Spokane. These are some of the warm-ups that I would recommend. And this is also how I would recommend you prepping any team whenever they're working on a format, is try to think of the key skills that the team is working on that is important for the format, or that the team needs to sharpen up in order to improve their shows, and build their warm-ups to focus in on those working areas. And if you're coaching their scenes, try to make sure that your notes are focused in on the theme of the day. One of the problems I see a lot of times in coaching is people will note all of the things that they're seeing in the scene, which can confuse players. What we want to do is focus in on a skill over the course of several weeks, watch that team really develop that skill, and then move on to another skill. If you have a really advanced team, you might mix and match these different warm-ups. If you're working with a team that's still working on passing the focus, we might just do 2 or 3 of those pass the focus warm-ups and then some warm-up scenes and then get into the Spokane. Same thing if we're trying to get them to work on framing or building stakes into the source scene or whatever else it ends up being. We just want to make sure we're focusing on that key skill. There are tons of other skills that are important to a Spokane, but these are the 4 areas that I think would be really helpful, that I think will produce the best first results. Again, if you have any questions, y'all, please leave them in the comments. I'm just kind of getting the channel started, and I'm excited to answer your questions and figure out what you all would like me to tell you about when it comes to improv. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.